Well, Debra Giles has 4 sons. One is a quiet storm, the next is musically gifted, the third is the athlete, and the fourth a writer. And each one has his own unique talents. I love that, don't you? And all of them are prophetic warriors.
Author and gifted Bible teacher Debra Giles has been in ministry for decades. As a mother of 4 grown sons, Debra has made it her mission to not only love and care for her children physically and emotionally, but also spiritually. In her book, Raising Prophetic Kids, Debra Giles offers practical tips to help you teach your children how to communicate with the Lord and reach their God-given potential.
Well, joining us with more is Debra Giles. We welcome you to the 700 Club. It's great to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Let's talk a little bit about prophecy. There are a lot of people, I think, today who think that's Old Testament, and they're not exposed to anything in the day that we live in. But God began to speak to you very early in your life. You say that in your teens, he was really talking to you about this, and you really didn't have encouragement at home about it. Share with us what those early times with God were like.
Absolutely. So those early years were definitely challenging. As a young kid, I'd have lots of dreams, and my mom, I guess she didn't understand them, so I would talk to my grandmother about them. And she listened, and even though she didn't give me any advice, she did listen, so that was good. And then as I grew, about age 14, I gave my heart to the Lord at home, was unchurched. Wow. And my parents were non-believers. They were great parents, but they just did not go to church. And so as I grew, you know, in the things of the Lord, I would have these prophetic dreams, and he would wake me up, you know, in the wee hours of the morning and speak to me. And so I would take the notes, put them in the back of my Bible, and close up the book. And, you know, I really hid it. I was a very shy kid, so I didn't really share those things with anyone.
I think it's remarkable that even though you didn't have experience in your immediate family per se with this, that you knew in your heart that God was speaking something significant to you. How important was your grandmother's support to you during that time? Very,
very important. I think it's critical for parents, you know, to listen to their children. Sure. Even though, you know, my parents didn't understand, you know, they kind of dismissed it, but because she took the time and she listened, and I would, you know, share things like, oh, you know, I had another one of those dreams, and, you know, she would pay attention to, you know, what I said, and it made a lot of difference in my life.
You say that becoming a parent that is raising prophetic kids starts very early on. I mean, we're talking about dreams that you had as a child, and then in your teen years, God really began speaking to you frequently about things. But you talk about the importance of names. I mean, how does that play a role in all of this?
I think names are very important. Even in the scripture with Jabez, we know that his name, you know, means pain. And every time his mom would call his name, I could only imagine that she was basically reinforcing pain in his life. And so he reaches out to God, cries out to God, and says, you know, don't hold this to my charge in so many words. You know, I want to be blessed. I don't want, you know, my name to be associated with pain. So I think your name is very important. And even as I begin to choose the names for my children, even though they're different, I made sure I researched the meanings and made sure that there was something that was godly associated with those names.
It's almost like you're declaring a banner of godliness over them.
Yes.
Yeah, I think of how God changed Abraham and Sarah's names, and then Jesus changed Peter's name. So there is something strong in all of that. You mentioned dreams, and I think, you know, lots of people have dreams. Lots of times as parents, you know, our children come into our bedrooms in the middle of the night because they've had a bad dream. How do you discern whether a dream is just because you ate pizza the night before you went to sleep, or because there's something that God's really trying to say?
That's a great question. So I think whenever there is a dream, the thing you have to take and pay attention to is, what emotion did you get from that dream? Was there fear associated with the dream? You know, I know most of the time in the scripture, whenever there was an angel there, even though there was fear, the angel of the Lord would always say, fear not. And we know that the enemy is the author of fear, so he's going to reinforce that fear. And so that's very important. You know, when you are having a dream and you're interpreting that dream, what was it like? What was the environment? You know, what was the setting? You know, was it demonic? You know, was it God speaking specific words? I always pay attention to that as well. And even as my children would come to me, share their dreams, I would walk them through the dream. And if it was a nightmare, you know, I would take my time and teach them how to take authority over that dream. And if the enemy came, you know, there was another demonic encounter, then they could take authority and cast that thing out.
As a parent, what are some practical ways that we can nurture our children's prophetic gifts? I mean, dreams would be one gift. There would be other ways that God would speak to our children as well. How do we nurture that in our kids?
I think one of the most important ways to nurture it is to listen. First of all, we need to listen to them and let them know that what they're saying, you know, is real. We're giving that reinforcement to them. And then once we listen, if we are prophetic parents ourselves, then, you know, we can begin to take them in the scripture. We can reinforce it that way. We can reinforce it through prayer. We can, you know, take our time, teach them how to pray, teach them how to have a relationship with God. That's one of the things that I did with my sons. I think that's very important because they're going to need it once they grow up. You know, there's so much that's happening today.
Absolutely.
That we really need to have a relationship with God. And the earlier we start, the better we are.
So what would be some common mistakes you could make in all of this?
Oh, wow. Common mistakes for parents. I think one of the things is ignoring what your child is trying to share with you. And as we ignore that, that basically tells them that what they've just encountered is not important. You know, even if we don't understand it, I often tell people, if you're not prophetic or if you don't understand the prophetic, find someone who is and bring a mentor into that child's life that can also help and help you as a parent as well.
How do we discern whether someone who's in a prophetic role, whether through the church or on their own, how do we discern whether it's legit or not?
I think, first of all, their ministry has to be proven. Their lifestyle needs to be pure. They need to be a person of integrity, and it needs to be someone that the parent can trust. And I would say this, you don't have to leave the child with the person. I think it's good if you're there with that child because it also, you know, helps, you know, to reassure that child that everything is okay. And if that is a person that you can trust and that person has been vetted, then, you know, it's good to, you know, allow that person to speak into their life.
Well, there's so much in here, raising prophetic kids. You know, every once in a while I'll see a pretty young child on Facebook or someplace that is just speaking the word of the Lord so clearly. And so, you know, I think the parent must have done something really remarkable in affirming that gift. So if you have an interest in understanding more about prophetic gift, about how to affirm that in your children, you can learn more in Debra's brand new book. It's called Raising Prophetic Kids, The Building Blocks of Nurturing Spiritual Gifts. It's available nationwide. We need it in our day. Thank you, Debra, so much. It's great to have you with us today.
Thank you.